The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Illya Friedman.
Episode 27.
Holy crap, here we are, episode 27.
The Cinematography Podcast, episode 27.
Thank you all so much for tuning into episode 27, and what an episode 27 we have for you. I can't even begin to tell you the places you're about to go.
Yeah, we're going to go some places, for sure.
So before we get to that, Illya, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. How are you?
Good. I was trying to tee up that you just came back from an awesome convention.
I did. I came back from Camera Image, is the correct pronunciation, even though you'll hear most people say Camera Image, which sounds very pretentious, and it's a little bit pretentious, but it's also in Bydgoszcz, Poland, which is, working class and not exactly what you think of when you think of fancy film festival in Europe.
Super communist bloc looking, I'm hoping.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that for sure. But it is the only film festival dedicated to cinematography. And the cinematographers are the people who are celebrated there over the directors, over stars. They do all the Q&As. And for the cinematography community, it's really quite a thing. It's pretty amazing. And I will tell you, there were multiple people there who kept saying, oh yeah, it's 1 year away from being not cool anymore. Like 1 year away before this becomes Sundance and everyone shows up here and
hipsters.
It's not a thing. So,
oh man.
But yeah, so it's a little bit underground right now, but it's not really. They've been doing it for 20 something years. It's it's amazing. And you get a lot of, amazing conversations and amazing parties. And it's Poland, somewhere I'd never been, in November. My wife has tried many times to dissuade me from going by just saying the words Poland in November, and it's true, it's cold, but this year
you just talked me out of it.
Yeah, exactly. It's this year was warm in that it was at the high 40s while I was there mostly.
That's not too bad.
Yeah, but the last day there dropped to like 33, which is
Sundance is worse than that.
Sundance is worse than that, but there have been years where it's snowing at Camera Image, so thankfully this was not one of those years.
Do you need to speak Polish to get around?
Definitely not. It is very, very English friendly there.
Oh, sweet. And how did you find Poland in general?
The portions of food was amazing. The people were incredibly friendly, and your money as a Westerner goes really far. So it's kind of an amazing place to travel, but I think you kind of got to know what you're getting into. It is definitely sort of like Eastern European, culture shock.
I think I'd enjoy the architecture.
There is some fun architecture there. Maybe I'll stick a picture in the show notes.
You totally should. Maybe one of these years I'll try and go to that when I don't have a 6-month-old child.
Ben, who's on the show today?
Who's on the show today is honestly one of our great dream people to have on the show. It's Shane Hurlbut. Shane Hurlbut, who, as we said before, we played his epic war story, which I think we're both still listening to as I'm describing it.
Yeah, just wait. His interview was even more epic.
But when what I said was when you and I had first talked about doing a podcast about cinematography, we had taken Lydia Hurlbut, his wife and manager, out to lunch and kind of pitched her on the idea, and she seemed way into it. And that was like 2006, I want to say. Yeah,
it was like 10 years ago at least.
It was a while ago. Yeah. And so he was somebody, and also I want to say this spoils nothing. Total class act, brought us wine and cheese.
Yeah, the first person we've interviewed to bring us wine and cheese. And let me just throw this out there to all future interviewees.
Yeah,
you want to get on our good side. Yeah. Bring something to nosh on.
I'm looking at you, Walt Lloyd. I mean, certainly Charles Papert didn't bring anything that classy with him.
More shout outs for Charles. All right, great. Yeah. We're never going to hear the end of this. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, Shane Hurlbut.
Strap in, Shane Hurlbut.
The Cinematography Podcast interview.
Shane Hurlbut, thank you so much for coming here to the Cinematography Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on here.
I want to jump right in and talk. We're going to talk about your background and education and all that stuff. But I kind of want to start with probably what a lot of our listeners are going to want to hear you talk about first, which is the DSLR revolution, which I would say you were one of the generals of. And like suddenly everything changed for independent filmmakers. So how much responsibility weighed on you when you started realizing like, holy crap, I can change everything? What was that like?
Well, I think it really came down to, for me, I love film. I had shot 18 movies probably on 35 millimeter film. And for me, in that sense, it had always been this very huge beast that we had to kind of, quell. It's like, how are we going to move this thing, and how are we going to perpetuate the motion, and how can this device continue to move with a character uniquely and everything. And trust me, I mean, so many movies have been done with film that are absolutely magical. I'm not taking anything away from that, but the mass moving business changed with the DSLR revolution. Mm-hmm. We were not moving mass of 40 or 60 pounds. We were moving mass of 2.5 pounds. And how did that make you feel? And then at the same time, you quantitate it to economics, because now your economics are, okay, let's say if I had to shoot on 35 millimeter film and I had to process it and make a whole movie, what was that going to cost? Now, all of a sudden, somebody could buy a 5D, get a CF card, go on Adobe Premiere Pro, edit in his garage, use some Pro Tools or Audition, do your sound design, get some band to write a score, and you got a movie.
Yeah.
And that was very powerful. And I didn't really see it until I started to be in it, how amazing, really kind of deconstructing this camera, because it had tons of quirks, and it was a still camera. It wasn't a motion camera, but it had this motion sensor that could, create HD video. And when I started to use it, and when I started to see the depth of field, it looked unlike any of the video cameras that were out there, 2/3 chip-wise, Sony, all these other things that were trying to create. This was a full frame sensor. This was a sensor that had really shallow depth of field, and it had everything that now the Arri 65 and the Red Monstro and all these had aspired to be during that time. It was a full frame sensor shooting HD video with a great color space. And it started to give people a voice that never really had a voice. And that's what I thought was so powerful from this. And the reason I ended up using the 5D is not to ignite a revolution. It was because it was the best for the story. And it was the best for the economics of what I was asked to deliver. I was asked to deliver a movie that had to be shot under $5 million, that had to shoot action sequences with Night Stalker helicopters coming in, boats slung from them, fast roping down, getting in there, going down, minigunning the shit out of like all these bad guys, rescuing this, CIA operative, getting her in a boat and tailing off down the river. And I had to do that with 5 individuals.
Wow.
5. That's it. So it's like what my ask was, I literally systematically went through the cameras that were available at the time, and that seemed to just call, it just like a spotlight came up on the 5D. I think that I was introduced to the 5D Mark II at an ASC wine and cheese function. So I remember pulling into the parking lot down in Hollywood and meandering my way all the wooden steps all the way up to the 4th floor. And they had a model and they had some seamless there. And what just flew off the screen for me was the depth of field. I was like, whoa, This is nothing that I had seen in any of the chip sizes that we had been dealing with the 2/3 and 1/3 chip cameras at that point. And it had a very three-dimensional quality to it. And I just started playing around with it, and the menu seemed very easy and user-friendly and didn't have 40 different sub-menus to go down the rabbit holes. And I was like, wow. And then Mick G called me literally a week later, and he goes, Shane, I want you to direct this weird, like, alternative marketing campaign. We're calling it TechCom, and it's 9 cliffhangers up to the release of Terminator Salvation. And my assistant is kind of writing the scripts and all, and I'd love for you to direct it. And I was like, well, that sounds really cool. And I read the script, and it all centered around a helmet cam. And this person who was engaged with the camera was literally, talking to it like he was trying to talk to the resistance to his headquarters, and that he's trying to, they're going to get through this stronghold and they're going to get to the base, and he's doing everything he can to stop them. And I thought, oh my God, if I mount that camera on a helmet, or I just have somebody hold it in their hand, this is going to look so immersive.
I even remember Scott Billups had done this thing for David Lynch where he'd shot on the PD-150 or something, and he wanted to make it heavier. So he'd cut a big piece of lead that he mounted the PD-150 to so that it was heavy and harder to move around so it would be more cinematic. But the DSLR thing is the opposite. It's using its lightness as an advantage. Exactly, and that's what we tried to do with Act of Valor. So out of the Terminator thing, I was asked to Campfire Media was the creative behind it all. My good friend Mike Manello, have to give him a shout out. Mike Manello is the owner of the main guy at Campfire Media. Yes, and Bandito Brothers was contracted to do all the editorial on it. So I came on as the director, cameraman, and we did the 9-part series. And my assistant, Po Chan, who had done a lot of movies with me too, also helped direct. So we were kind of co-directors on it. Mm-hmm. And she did a lot of the casting and all the wardrobe, and we work very well together in that kind of way. I take care of a lot of the visuals. She takes care of the acting and the emotion and all the wardrobe, hair, makeup, all that kind of stuff. And we were doing it at Bandito Brothers. They saw the quality that I got out of that Canon 5D, and they took me into their conference room. And their conference room was a army tent in the middle of a barrel warehouse in that Flatiron complex, the iron complex down in Culver City. Black Iron, I think it's called. And they said, Shane, we have this very interesting movie. We're going to follow real Navy SEALs. We have a narrative film, and we'd like you to shoot it. And I'm like, what the hell is this thing? Like a documentary? I mean, what are we doing with these guys? No. It's a narrative piece that has been written around the SEALs training missions for 2 years. I'm like, Navy SEALs acting. I don't know. I still don't know.
I was like, all right, how about if I'll shoot the first 3 days of it and see how it goes. So we went down to Key West and we did what they call a MEO, where it's a maritime interdiction operation or something. And it's where the SEALs hit a yacht from the air and the sea. And we had 3 days to shoot it in, and then there was this massive interrogation on board where they try to get information out of this guy that they have sequestered. And I immediately started to relate with these SEALs, see how amazing warriors these guys were. Their families came down. I mean, it was like a really unique experience. And the biggest takeaway from that is it was the first time I felt like I went back to true filmmaking because our footprint was so small.
Were you filming this whole thing?
Oh, yeah, filming this whole thing.
And you were doing it on the 5D at the time?
Yeah, 5D, 8 cameras. And what was so amazing about it was that I felt so in tune with the whole process because our crew was so small that I was the travel coordinator on Act of Valor. I booked all the hotel rooms.
Oh, wow.
I booked all the flights. I did all that because that's all we had. We only had 6 or 8 people as the core. The directors, Mouse McCoy and Scott Waugh, they not only directed, but they also were the camera operators as well. A lot of time my first ACs were operating. Everyone was just all in on this film. And I was the gaffer. I was the key grip sometimes. I mean, so much innovation came out of this film of having to take the camera, and I went to Panavision and I was like, I don't want to shoot on all this Canon glass. I want to shoot with Panavision glass. Can you make a Panavision mount that can go onto these cameras?
Were they able to?
Yeah. So they made, so we had, 18 DSLRs with all Panavision mounts, and we were using Primos the whole time to shoot it. And this is where I'll never forget, there was one shot where I had my Canon 5D onto a 3:1 Primo zoom. So the Primo zoom is like 2.5 feet long, and all there is this sensor hanging off the back of it. And I looked at that and I go, that is going to be the future right there. You're going to basically be clipping on a sensor to this lens, and we're going to be moving this thing around.
Amazing. And maybe this is a little bit outside the realm of cinematography, but so what was it like directing or getting performances out of Navy SEALs? How much were they asked to actually perform, like memorize script pages? And
they were asked to memorize all that. Yeah, It was a narrative film, and we had a great writer that wrote the whole screenplay, and then we asked them, how would they say it? Yeah. And then they would break it down and say, I would never say this. This is what I would say. And we're like, okay. And then another thing that we wanted to do is break down the whole filmmaking process. Think about it. If you're a Navy SEAL that's sitting there, killing bad guys all over the world, the last thing you want is a big-ass Panavision film camera with sound and lights and all this stuff around you. It kind of sucks the air out of their performance.
Exactly. They're like in the moment, right?
Yeah, they're not trained professionally to be around all this stuff, and somebody's around or whatever. So what we wanted to do is strip it all down, make it as small as possible, make it as compact, make it as minimal amount of crew as we could. And that's where their performance started to come alive, because they felt very comfortable. And both Scott Waugh and Mouse McCoy made them incredibly comfortable. And then our small little team just continued to work just like a Navy SEAL team.
Oh, wow. So how many people total were on this crew? Because, I mean, it's like at this point in your career, you're working on crews with hundreds of people on them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Terminator Salvation, just lighting, grip, camera, department and pre-rigs, I had 127 people just working for my department.
So, and was this the next thing you had done after Terminator Salvation? So it's a crew of what, 8?
8 or 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like summer camp, right?
Oh, I mean, that's what was so inspiring about it. I mean, literally, we are driving down to Key West, and Scotty Waugh is driving, and we had mobile offices is what we called them. I had my 400-watt booster that I would jam into the cigarette lighter that enabled my computer. And I got my hotspot, and we're jamming down the road, and we're shot listing the whole beginning of this MEO sequence. And I'm talking about, not just shot listing and, we got an over this there. We're talking about transitions where I'm coming up out of water. I got Pete Zuccarini that did, Into the Blue for me, and Terminator Salvation. I have him on full on lock in the water with me as well. and we're dealing with transitions. I'm pink highlighting the transition shots, how we're going to take this whole thing down. And we're doing this while we're driving to Key West. And it was so inspiring because we had one producer on the thing, and we had some great liaisons from DOD, and they really paved the way for us. I mean, when it was all said and done, this movie was made, and the government didn't even know that we made it.
Really? Like they were on duty SEALs?
Yeah, on duty SEALs.
Whoa.
And we're like making this film that was basically an anthem, like kind of Top Gun for special forces.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy because you sit back and step away from the whole experience. And this film took 2.5 years to make. I started in 2009, and the innovation of the 5D. You know, everyone's like, yeah, you shot that thing on the 24 frame. I'm like, what? There's no 24 frame.
I remember you had to use.
It was 30 frames. I had to
use
do
Twixtor
the
or something. Yeah,
the Twixtor pull down and all that stuff.
Oh man.
You know,
I remember I almost got into a big argument with a guy from Canon who swore to me the 5D could never be retimed. The chip couldn't be retimed to 24 frames per second. It would always be 30, and maybe they would have a 24 frame one. And this is at the DGA at Digital Days, and then like 2 months later they came out with the 24p. You know, and I was like, you know, like that was the one thing. Like, why did you make it 30 frames?
Well, in the middle of Act of Valor, I get asked by Canon. They're like, you know, I know you've been wanting 24 frames, Shane. We got the 24p firmware update. We want a short film shot around this. So I turned to my, a very good friend and my assistant, Po Chan, and I said, write me a short film that will show the power of this DSLR. Mm-hmm. And she, in 24 hours, wrote the last 3 minutes. And we sent that to Canon, and, Lydia, my wife, produced this whole thing. We were making it with popsicle sticks and gaffer's tape because they didn't have much money to spend on it, and Bandito was like behind it to help us out, and we shot a lot of it in Bandito Brothers, and then we got some locations around. But that's when all that I'd learned on Act of Valor, I funneled into that. And I made the DSLR look even better on that film than I had on Act of Valor because I learned so much through that. Because it was an absolute learning process. As I'm turning this camera on, the thing is literally 3 months in the field.
Yeah.
Nobody's using it as a motion capture. They're using it as a still camera. So I'm like figuring it out. I'm like trying to, why is this thing so contrasty? What if we go into the menu and reduce the contrast and sharpness? And then I started creating my own picture profiles. We weren't going with what was there, portrait and landscape and all that stuff. We were trying to, really trailblaze this technology.
Yeah, and like the form factor of so many cameras has become like that, like Blackmagic's cameras and stuff like that. But I always feel like a lot of them lost sort of the initial, maybe it was a sugar rush of the DSLR of like, oh my God, I can afford this. Like Canon followed that by releasing great cameras like the C500 or whatnot, but like suddenly they were priced to rent again. They were out of the realm of an average schmo's ability to buy them. And also like if you're doing a smaller production, I don't know, Act of Valor, something in the neighborhood of a $5 million movie, you can afford to trash a bunch of those cameras if you want to. But still, it's going to take a little bit more intestinal fortitude to trash a $15,000 camera than a $1,500 camera. But so Act of Valor, you didn't shoot it all in a row. It was the shoot was broken up, or
yeah, it was like doing 50 commercials. Mm-hmm. We would say, okay, we're going to do the Key West portion of this Mio takedown. We'd shoot that for 3 days, then we'd come back to Los Angeles. Then we're like, okay, now we're going to go down and shoot on an aircraft carrier and shoot that for a week. And then we come back. And then we're like, okay, now we're going to go to Costa Rica and we're going to shoot this whole CIA agent being captured along the river. And, we're going to stage that whole thing.
And
we
this is
come
over the
back.
course of 2 years, you said?
2.5 years. Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, how did you even keep the continuity of what you were doing in your head for a 2.5? I mean, I'm sure you're working on other projects in that 2.5 year period.
Yeah, it was very difficult. But at the same time, this is when Lydia and I started the blog in 2009, the Hurl blog, and that started to pool in so much sharing from all over the world, because this revolution was not in the United States, it was global. And they started telling me, sharing knowledge, tests that they had done, and they set the camera at this specific function and try this out. And then I would literally, because Act of Valor was broken up, I got better and better at it. And when we got to Kiev, Ukraine, we had dropped all film, because we always kept the film there. So if something, if we weren't getting the DSLR in the pocket, we could always punt to the film.
Yeah.
And when we got to Kiev, and I'd say that's day 20 out of 45 on the movie, I was full DSLR. I felt so confident with everything that all these wonderful people globally had shared with me and kind of helped me through this process, as well as then what Lydia and I started to voice out and share all over the world. So it wasn't just, me getting it and then saying, oh, I got my secret.
Yeah.
I was like, this is amazing. This is what I've learned,
Yeah. Well, and it's not somebody could take what you did and do it themselves, but it's not going to look the same. It's not going to be the same.
They're not going to be me.
Exactly.
But at least let's, set them up for success.
So, but I want to talk a little bit too. Again, we try not get too deep into the tech, but just the fact of what you had to deal with turning 30 frames into 24 frames, and I kind of interrupted you. Talk about how that impacted the workflow, or how you had to go about doing what you were doing.
Well, the workflow on the film was very unique. We had, I think at the height, we had 18 bodies that we were working with, and we had those in all different configurations. This is something that I had learned on Into the Blue. On Into the Blue, I shot that on film in 2003 with 14 cameras. So I had 4 in underwater housings. I had 1 on a techno crane. I had 1 on an aqua housing on a Foxy crane that I could submerge and come up out. I had 2 in handheld mode. I had 2 in studio mode, and I had 1 on a Steadicam.
Yeah.
So that kind of idea, where just think about when you're on the ocean, all that time of converting a body is wasted. And also you're on seas that are going up and down. And so everything had to be already kind of there. So you used them like guns on a rack. And, it's time for the shotgun. It's time for the AK-47. It's time for the, Smith & Wesson 45. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So those guns on a rack, I did the same methodology on Act of Valor. And we had 2 handheld rigs that were just Zeiss, 2 handheld rigs that were just Panavision Primos. We had helmet cams. We had it on techno cranes. It was so funny. We had 5Ds on techno cranes. It's like all this stuff.
Yeah. I would love to see a picture of that.
All this was kind of, put together on this film, and the workflow was literally grab that CF card, download it, and we had this really incredibly intelligent post-production guy named Mike McCarthy. And we called Bandito Brothers second story in this barrel warehouse, the Millennial Falcon.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So this Millennium Falcon was he took iBook drives and he daisy chained 120 of them together. And he created 120 terabytes out of daisy-chained iBook drives.
Wow. Today you just be like, I'm going to go to Fry's and get the 120 terabyte drive. It's a thumb drive.
Exactly. But in 2009, that didn't exist.
I know.
And so they were editing all this, and we shot the culmination of something like 3.5 million feet of film. On this film in digital on the CF card. That's how much we were shooting on it. I mean, it was just 18 cameras rolling, and sometimes they were rolling for a long period of time because this was the first film since 1921 that actually used live fire. So
yeah, that's what I've always heard, and to me that always just sounds bananas.
There's a great behind the scenes thing where the director goes, Scotty Waugh goes, "We have more live ammo than blanks."
Oh my God. I mean, but seriously, so you were shooting live ammo at cameras, and like, didn't you have like custom housing that you built so that it would protect the CF card even if it demolished the camera? Exactly.
So we took this was the perfect like a send off of film. We took 435 mag cases and used them for our crash housings. And we cut the holes out of them to be able to put the lens in there. We completely blanketed the whole thing with 1/2-inch steel. And we just, there was a sequence where the Swick boats come in and they spin around and they fire their miniguns. And it's like 2,100 rounds a minute. And we said, the first time you come in, shoot over the cameras. And I had the crash housings all painted fluorescent orange so they could see them. Mm-hmm. So I said, when you come in, the first thing you do is shoot over the cameras. That's like we're, shooting at the bad guys in the deep. And they're like, yeah, got it. Second time you come in, you shoot in front of the cameras. So all the dirt kicks up and shoots and all the spray from the water and all that dirt flies in the lens. They're like, got it. I said, third time you come around the corner, all you do is lay in on that camera. Just blow that shit up. And we'd pull these things.
You did the same exact thing on Crazy Beautiful, I'm sure. I've heard all about that.
But yeah, I mean, it was so hilarious because we'd crack open the 435 mag case and the 5D would just be exploded into like 12 parts with a 50 caliber round, and there the CF card would be hanging off to the side, and we'd pop it out, we'd put it right in the thing, and bam, we had that footage.
And the Cinematography podcast, by the way, is brought to you by Arri. So thank you, Arri, for making the 435 mags that withstood bullets on Act of Valor and literally did nothing else. That's funny as hell. That's crazy. Okay.
And the other thing that we did, which was so awesome, is I had this one French operator, and he was a painter at the same time. So he painted the 435s in camo. Perfect camo to blend into the Costa Rican rainforest. So we literally had these things because we put them in harm's way. I mean, okay, let me kind of set this one up for you. And I don't know if I've ever told my wife this, and she's sitting right here, so she's going to freak out.
Shaking her head. Podcast listeners, she's shaking her head right now.
Okay, so imagine this setup. We have a Navy SEAL with an RPG. Not a fake one, a real one. Now, where am I? I'm the A camera. I'm behind the guy who is going to yell out, rocket out, and that missile is going to fly past the camera.
What?
And blow up the truck behind me. Okay? So now back behind me is 9 cameras, some 35 millimeter slow-mo, some 5Ds that's capturing this whole thing. Now the truck behind me is being driven remote control. So there's nobody driving that.
Oh, okay.
But the two Navy SEALs...
So nobody's in danger in that thing. Okay, go on, yes.
No, nobody's in danger in that.
Good. I'm glad no one was in danger.
I'm the only one, along with the Navy SEALs, that's endangered with the 40 Mike missile that's flying past our truck. Now, I turn to the Navy SEAL, and I go, is this safe? And he goes, would my guy kill us? And I go... Yeah, you're right. This is safe as shit. I love it. So, of course, I'm driving in this thing, and I'm over the shoulder, and this thing comes, and the sound was something that I've never heard in my life. It was a rocket being propelled at like 400 miles an hour. It's like a jet engine next to the head. And he goes, rocket out! And that goes by. And all of a sudden, I hold with him. And then I pan back as that thing blows up. And then I pan back to him. And he goes, this is good shit. I was like, this movie is crazy. I mean, and this was every day on this film. Every day you were like, okay, let me get this straight. I'm going to be in the A-camera car that they shoot the rocket at. Yeah, you're going to be fine.
Wow.
What?
It's the all war story episode. No, not actual war. Wow, that's bananas.
Yeah.
That's outrageous.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the whole movie was, we go into a nuclear sub at Key West, and we can't just go to the dry dock in Georgia and shoot this 3-page scene. We couldn't do anything like that. We had to go on the mission. So they were going to the Horn of Africa to kill some Somalis. That was their mission. Mm-hmm. And we just happened to tag along on the way. And, okay, so you got to imagine how we have to load onto the sub. They can only breach for 45 seconds because they are then found on radar and they can be compromised. So we have all our gear in these little cricks, they call them. They're 8 feet long inflatable boats with a little 50cc motor on it. And we have been given a coordinate out in the middle of the ocean. And we're like, you know, we were just in there and I'm like operating the camera and I'm going over the shoulder and I'm trying to get the shot and like, and all of a sudden out of the depths, this thing goes boosh out of the ocean and then lays on its, it puts its front up and lays its back and we go whoosh right up onto the nuclear sub with these cricks. We grab all our camera gear, they open the portal, we throw them down, and then we get as many people in there as possible for the 45 seconds. They close that portal and they go back under the ocean. So now there's 2 more cricks out there. And now they have to hit it again. So we go for another hour and we're waiting for where it's going to be. And then we move to that place and then the thing pops out of the water again. It took us 3 times. 345 seconds is all we had to get all the gear that we then went under the Atlantic. And then 2.5 days later, we popped up at the Horn of Africa. Now I'm like, okay, let me get this straight. How fast does this thing go? Well, that's confidential. I was like,
I can do math. I can find out how far these two.
This thing's doing over 300 miles an hour.
Underwater,
right? They said they get into the jet stream and, that's quote on the jet stream underwater with the currents and everything. And this thing just is like a missile. And then we did that, and while on the way, we shot this whole 4-page dialogue scene, and then we were done, and then we're like, okay, can we go back? And they're like, no. So we were on there for like 12 days on this sub, and I have to say it was an incredible experience. I mean, I kind of, after the 8 days, I'm like, all right, let's get me off this thing.
It's got to be enough, But I mean, like, very, very few people have ever made, a movie that kind of was completed as a regular feature film, but was made in such an unconventional method. What did it feel like to just be like saying, like, the rule book that I learned in college that I've been doing my whole life, fuck it, I'm doing this a completely different way.
Exactly. And that's what was so inspiring. And so it just fueled all my passion because I felt like I was... I have this saying that anytime you feel comfortable, you got to flip yourself. Mm-hmm. You cannot feel comfortable. You got to challenge yourself to always be doing something different. And this was something that really challenged me as a filmmaker. It was not only trying to demystify the tech, it was taking the demystification of that tech and then using it to propel the story. And once I started to figure it out, and once I cracked that egg, I think on like day 20 of really understanding that device and really getting the best out of it could ever be gotten, that's when I really felt I was just firing on 12 cylinders. And we really... this is where we really started to crank, and I felt so confident with it. And then my confidence started to create a ripple effect throughout all the team, and they knew that my recipe and my picture profiles and everything would save them, and they felt more confident in what they were operating, and they could be more aggressive, and they could push themselves out of the comfort zone, and it just really culminated to a great project, and I think a really cool film.
And so why don't we see more like DSLR movies getting made and seen in theaters, or do we, and just nobody draws any attention to them?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because there was like that, there was The Silent House, and I'm trying to think of any other like that were like all five. There was we were talking about it earlier, Tiny Furniture, Lena Dunham's first feature.
Right.
But
and
you still...
Gail Tattersall shot an episode of
House.
Of House
yes.
with it.
I remember watching that episode of House and being like, this is actually one of the best looking episodes of House ever. Like it just looked, and I'm sure it's because of that giant sensor on that thing.
Yeah, it just looked different, and I think that's what we're always kind of aspiring to, is like, how can we make it different? How can the difference help that story, and how can it apply and take the performance and take the script, and how can that all elevate the product, And I thought the 5D was just the perfect tool to tell that story, especially in the footprint that we had to operate on.
Yeah.
I mean, they literally say there's 6 people on a sub. That's it. That's all you have.
I mean, like, you couldn't have done that with any other camera, especially
No.
at the time. They all would have been like, 2 feet long and weighed 30 pounds.
Exactly. How many times would I had to compromise the sub to get all that gear on there? 10 times? They told us we only had 2, and they gave us 1 more because the sound mixer didn't get on.
So with all that in mind, I kind of want to go to the question that I ask everybody, which I don't even know where I always have a thought of where this is going to go. But I believe that cinematographers, either when they're given a script, they either start with an idea, and as they're reading the script, they're seeing compositions in their head, or they're seeing how it's going to look lighting-wise in their head. Where do you start? Because I feel like your stuff, especially Act of Valor on forward, but like your stuff has there's such a kineticism to so much of it, need for speed, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're reading a script, what's occurring to you?
Well, I read the script probably 4 or 5 times before I even jot down a note, before I even come up with an image. I want to know it so well that I'm like, oh yeah, it's the scene at Aaron Paul's garage where this guy confronts him and blah, blah, blah. I just know it. So it's just like a shorthand to me. And then once I get that shorthand, I can then start to see the film come alive. And the first thing I do is I create what I call the look document. Before I come up with shots, before I come up with anything, I just sit there, and each scene, I think about it on how it will look like in light.
Yeah. So it's light.
It's light. It's the texture.
It starts with light.
It starts with the light.
Starts with light, folks.
And then the motion comes on it. Then that layer comes. Then I start to come into the shots and how the camera will feel, and how. So first it's the light, and that light is centered around the emotion of the story. Mm-hmm. Whether they're sad, whether they're scared, whether whether they're alone. What is the emotion of that scene? Then I describe it very viscerally. It's not just light comes through a window. It's like, late morning shafts come through the window. There's cyan undertones into the shadows. As he walks through, the light plays across his face. It's very descriptive. Mm-hmm. And then off of that, then I stand back and go, okay, what's the key frame of every scene? What one shot is going to deliver the whole emotional impact of that scene? And then I build off of that.
Interesting. So when you're working with directors, like you've worked with Mick G a bunch, right? So when you're working with directors, do you come in and pitch those ideas to the director? Does the director come in and give you boards that you're to work off? I mean, I'm sure it's everything and anything.
Yeah, it's different every single time.
But like, so is this just a reference for you so that you can kind of internalize?
Yeah, it's a reference for me to when I hear how he's pitching a scene or how she's pitching a scene, I'll say, but what about this? So I always have that. I'm always a springboard, where he can say, yeah, we're going to do it this way, da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, yeah, but classic example, Crazy Beautiful, a scene where Kirsten Dunst gets sent away to Turnabout Ranch and somewhere in Idaho, and she has to come in and clean out her locker in the photo, media room. And Jay Hernandez comes in there. Well, the original way it was written and how John Stockwell wanted to do it was she was at the locker, Jay Hernandez comes in, walks over, and they have a conversation. And when I read that scene, I saw the key frame of her on her knees behind this light box, where you see your negatives and everything from. And when he comes in, she turns on her knees and all you see is her head on a platter. That's the key frame. The fragility, the damaged, all this stuff conveyed in that one frame, told the whole story of that scene. And he's like, that's a great idea. All right, Kirsten, do you mind going down on your knees? She's like, no, that sounds cool. And she's, she starts laying out all these negatives and everything, and she's picking them up, and then he comes in, and then she gets up, and they have this conversation. Well, these are the things that I try to be that springboard of, kind of putting the director's hat on and say, what about this idea?
Yeah.
I don't necessarily have to, I don't get pissed off in any way if they don't select it. It's just that I want to have a point of view. And I think it's very important for director photographies to have their point of view and to be there to really kind of not make their movie, but come up with ideas that then enhance the story. And together, once they start seeing the springboard, the directors start to push off of it, and then it becomes very collaborative. This last film I did in Italy called No Place Like Home with Gabriele Muccino, he works very differently. He comes with the script that he wrote with the whole shot list embedded in it. Mm-hmm. So, and his shot list, one shot could be 4.5 pages.
Really?
The description of it.
Oh, I was about to say, like, everything is done for 4.5 pages, page-long oneers, or?
Yes.
Okay.
And he describes how they move and where they go. And I mean, it's incredible. It's like just a ballet of actors. And we had 19 or 21 ensemble cast of like the biggest stars in Italy on this thing. And he would weave them in like a ballet. It was incredible. And, so that's how he works. Each director is very unique. And
so let me ask you, when you're working on something like that, where the director has an outrageously specific vision of exactly how everything is to work, what's the creative angle that you bring to it? You're not there to just execute somebody else's idea. If he wanted to do that, he'd hire a gaffer and a camera operator. What is it that you're bringing to that?
So what I bring is how the camera is going to feel. Okay, so is it Steadicam? Is it going to be handheld? Is it going to be Movi? Is it going to be on a crane? What does that camera want to feel like? What's the emotion that's going on in the scene right now? And then how can I take that much higher? And then it's also the lighting side of it. What's the light feel like? We had this film where in the movie, you had this very colorful and very happy and very open and airy kind of feel in the beginning of this film. And then the skeletons in the closet start to come out with this family. and the mood changes, and the home that looked so light and airy before becomes cavernous. And this was kind of that approach. So my assistance with all this was really kind of taking each scene that he had described so beautifully in his shot list and then creating a look on that, and then creating how that light was going to feel within the emotion of the characters.
And obviously, to contrast that with something like Act of Valor, like you're just lucky to point a camera at a guy with an RPG and get a usable image.
Well, I mean, we had beautiful compositions and everything that was set up.
It's a gorgeous movie. To me, that like when you talk about this insane process, and obviously, I feel like that's, you could give away all of your secrets. No one's going to walk away and have your eye for how you shot that, because you were able to find, I'm assuming mostly on the fly, these outrageous compositions that are impactful and appropriate and gritty and, like nothing.
Correct.
Nobody's ever made a military movie like that since.
Yeah. And I thought what I loved about the experience more than anything is we were all in it together, and we were all learning together. We were learning how to step away from moving a camera that used to be 40 or 60 pounds and needed all this crew and all this peripheral around it. And we basically brought it down to something that you could hold in your hands, that would record in your hands, that you could pull focus in your hands, that you could see an exposure in your hands. You didn't use light meters. You didn't use anything. All that film was gauged off of the LCD screen in the back.
That's crazy.
Nothing was done off of monitors. There was none of that tech. It was literally all. And if I was on the yacht where I had all this, it was a white yacht that was like 140 feet long. The white sun was bouncing off of it. You could barely see the exposure in there.
Yeah.
And you just went with it. And that's what was so ballsy about the film, is we were fearless. We were a bunch of fearless filmmakers that just went down that rabbit hole and came out the other side and just said, here it is.
So when you're working on a film such as the one that you just worked on, which sounds like very specifically crafted, specifically moving, specifically lit, like kind of the stuff you were doing before you were doing Act of Valor, what lessons from the Act of Valor-y stuff that you have done did you bring to that project? Like how different is that movie today than if you had done it in 2005 or something?
I think the influence is just much more being in the moment. Mm-hmm. Act of Valor was so much by the seat of my pants, because we would literally never know what was going to happen. One day they said, we're going to go in this nuclear sub, and then they said the sub broke. So then we're like, all right, we're going to Kentucky and we're shooting this action sequence with Night Stalker helicopters and this thing. And I'm like, well, my camera package is really not gauged for that. Whatever. That's where we're going.
Fuck
it. We're going there. So then all of a sudden we're there, and I'm like, well, Jesus, I got like this 600, it's like, we need longer lenses. We can't get close to these Night Stalkers. All I have is primes. So then we had to get all that rushed in and stuff, but it was very fly by the seat of your pants. And that's what I am bringing on to something that is very well crafted, like Gabriele Muccino's film. I think the biggest thing that I can say that I took away from this experience and why he loves using me is because I light for 3 cameras like I'm lighting for 1. Mm-hmm. And for him, that's where the performance shines. Because he says he's been in an edit room where he doesn't shoot it that way, and the person moves their head this way, and they can't use that over the shoulder because in this angle, his head's not turned that way. Yeah. And the performance that would rock the audience out is thrown on the cutting room floor because it's just never going to match. It's going to look like a mistake. So we ended up shooting this movie with 3 cameras all the time. Now think about lighting that. Lighting very intimate sequences where 2 people are sitting in beds pushed up against a wall where all I have is a practical. And how I'm lighting the perfect 50-50 and the over and the over, and this woman has to look like absolutely stunningly beautiful. But at the same time, you got a big wide shot where you got to create mood, and the light can't be all super soft for this close-up on her, because that super soft light's going to blast all over and ruin all my contrast in the wide shot. So I really started to come up with a way that I could light 3 cameras really beautifully, and that's what just engaged that engine for me and Gabriele Muccino to really rock it out, because now he was getting the performance, he could cut it. And check this out. We did this film. I finished November 20th. He had the final cut done December 15th.
What?
Okay.
Well, they were obviously cutting it while you were shooting.
We were cutting it while we were shooting
That's still nuts.
But we're talking a 3 weeks director's cut. That's how well that film was crafted.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it was a testament to my undying passion to just make it look great all the time and not settle for when they said, Shane, we don't have the time for this. We cannot do this right now. We're over budget and everything. And I'm like, guys, you brought me in from the United States to deliver this look. And this is the look that we have to hold on to. And, Gabriele would like, just let's do it. And, the accuracy, I was able to color correct the movie in 3 days.
The whole movie.
And it has like, oh my God, it's so many different locations and so many, because it's 3 days and 2 nights. So there's all different types of, interiors. We're jumping around the horn. My God, we're in 50 different rooms. And these shots that we do, it's like the kind of shot where we go over the shoulder of these 2 love interests, and we round and we come around and we see her. And then he's like, motions to like, hey, come with me. And she looks over at her daughter, that this guy is not the husband. And he kind of goes away, and the camera lurks around her, and you start to see the wheels on in her mind, and the camera just holds and wraps around her, and she's looking at her daughter, and she's looking, my God, I'm in love with this guy. And she releases, and we rack focus, and you see him move into this hallway, and then we go around her and we follow her down the hallway.
This is all a oneer.
And then we see him at the base of a spiral staircase, and they start to go up, and we go up the spiral staircase with him, and we go into a room. And as we come up the spiral staircase, I have a 18K on the roof of this other of the part of the house that flares the lens just perfectly. And as they come around, we follow them in, and they open up the door, and we go into the door. And as we go into the door, I have an electrician outside that then pans the 18K so it flares me in that room. And as it flares me in that room, I wrap around, and they start kissing, and they go down on the bed, and he starts to take her clothes off, and he's ripping her pants off and everything. And then she pulls away from him, and we wrap around, and we go out the door, and she has this look on her face where, I mean, it's the emotion of so much love. She's just like in the heat of it, and she's like, ah. And we go wrap around, and he pins her up against the wall, and then all of a sudden you hear a scream, and they separate from the wall, and it's her daughter. And the daughter screams, and she runs to her, and the camera goes with her to thing. And then the guy runs, and we follow him down the staircase, and he starts to wind down the staircase, and we whip the camera around as she's screaming in the camera. And then they push down the hallway and go into the door and slam the door in our face.
Okay, so when you're working on a film like No Place Like Home, which, as you're talking about, the director Gabriele came in with these outrageously detailed description, meticulously designed shots, what are the lessons that you bring from something like Act of Valor, which I think most people would not even think of those two movies in the same universe, like they're not in the same cinematic language, but there must be something that you brought from your experience on Act of Valor into working on a movie like that is like the opposite when it comes to how it looks.
Well, I think, Gabriele and I, we're like 2 brothers from other mothers. I've never been so connected with this guy, just emotionally, the look, what he before he even says it, I'm doing it.
Oh, cool.
And that's what I really loved about our collaboration, because I read the script and I'm immediately starting to put the look together. And then he goes, so where are you going with this? And I'm like, this is where I want it to be very light and airy and da-da-da-da-da. And he goes, okay, yeah. And then we're going to go for this cavernous. Okay, cool. And I said, when I read this script, I read this as mice in a maze. And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, everything is, if we could rip the roof off of this house and see all the characters move with all in the spaces, to see that one of this reaction creates an action, this action creates a reaction, and that reaction sends this person over here. And then that reaction creates another action, and that action creates another reaction. You see all these mice in a maze. And he goes, yes, that's what I envision it. And that's why I started to come up with these, one shots that you can't even breathe. And that's where, when I started to feel like this, a lot of that Navy SEAL, training that I had on Act of Valor, because a lot of the shots that we did with the helmet cam and everything were these oneers where I had to light very from all different places where you couldn't see it, because the thing was on a 15 millimeter lens, and he's tilting up and he's tilting down, he's panning right, he's panning left. So with that, I had to come up with this style to light sequences that would feel like it was lit, beautifully, like it was, okay, we're going to light for this direction, then we're going to turn the camera over here, we're going to light for that direction, then we're going to turn the camera over here, and we're going to light for this direction. But this camera never stops moving and never stops spinning.
Yeah.
And that's where you have to, I use the kind of shoot from the hip style, because when you see it and when you read it, you're not sure you're going to be able to pull it off. Gabriele would start to set up the scene, and he'd rehearse with the actors for 45 minutes to an hour. And in the beginning, I'm just watching. And then as I start to see the performance and I start to see, okay, they're going to gravitate here and gravitate there, then I start to send my team to do stuff on the peripheral. Mm-hmm. So, okay, they're going out there. All right, well, Jesus, we got to control that. So fly that black overhead so we can create some neg fill. Anything that's not going to be where they're creating, all from the peripheral.
Yeah.
Because our schedule was 6 or 7, 9 pages a day on this film. So it's like, holy crap.
So 2 shots.
Yeah. Exactly. So, with that, you're like, okay, so how can I keep up with this pace? Oh, and this is the other thing. In Italy, it's only a 9-hour day, and they get an hour lunch. So it's only an 8-hour day.
And they come back super drunk, right?
Yeah, no wine. I was hoping for it. Just a lot of espresso. So, we would do all this, and I'd start to do all this peripheral lighting. And then he would say, okay, Shane, let's put the Steadicam up and let's do the rehearsal. And then on the rehearsal, I'd be at my monitor and I'd start to see the finesse of it. And okay, it's going too dark there, or is this too light? Got to take that out. And then at that point, he'd say, all right, how long? And it's at that point, I'm like, all right, 20 minutes or 15 minutes. Or, there was one that was a 5-minute shot that I had done enough on the peripheral the whole time. He said, all right, how long, Shane? And I go, 5 minutes. And he goes, what? And it was this 4-minute oneer that they were inside, outside, in rooms, outside, all over the place. And I had just had with Gabriele, it's all about the pre-rig. It's all about being able to put all the lights in places where you can just pan them and move them. And we weren't on a stage. We were in this massive villa, and I had this incredible rigger, Cesar, this key grip that was able to, because I thought, working in the States, if I have to suspend a big rig, they always go to the production designer. Can you give me a drape in the corner here? Can you give me a soffit over here? And I always were like, well, that kind of doesn't work with the architecture and all that stuff. But Jesus, I want this rig, and that's to hide the foot,
yeah,
the pipe. right? Well, with these guys, they suspended everything. Everything was
Is it just like a grid, like a theater?
Yeah, but it was all pushed with pressure up against the walls.
With like spreaders?
Yeah. But spreaders that he would camber across 40 feet.
Camber? I've never heard that word before.
Yeah, camber is when you bend the rail.
Oh, wow.
Right? So when you put weight on it, it straightens. It's the kind of thing where you going down the road and you see those flatbed 18-wheelers that don't have a load and they have that arch to them. That's camber.
I just learned a new word. Thank you very much. I'm going to use it. That's awesome. So to me, this is what's crazy, because Illya and I have talked about having a segment that we call Anatomy of a Shot, because, everyone's got some crazy ass shot that took forever to pull off, but it sounds like you had a movie full of them in this. But the craziest thing about what you're saying to me, or the thing that's kind of blowing my mind, is that you're doing these Touch of Evil style sequences or Children of Men, not, unbroken things, but you're kind of making it up you're not making it up, but you're inventing it, you're choreographing it on the day.
Correct.
You're figuring it out on the day because it has to work around the actors blocking and the
actor's blocking, and has to work them out what's going on with the weather. We would have sometimes where we'd have extreme weather on this island. I mean, we were in this amazing volcanic island in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. So it's like you're at the mercy of Mother Nature saying, okay, we're going to dump rain today. And then it's like, well, but this scene takes place in the sunny, airy, bright, and so now I got to create that. So it's like, okay, it's raining outside, but how can I bring 18 Ks of light into, a very challenged budget? I was using roofs to elevate my lights. Gabriele came up with this very intense crane shot where he wanted to start from a fish being taken off a grill, and we start with the fish and we go over the dad who's preparing it, and then we start to go top down as the mom takes the fish, and we start to go up and boom up, and we go to 10 to 20 to 30 to 40 feet high, and we reveal the whole villa top, and we see the kids running in from the garden and all the kids coming in, the family coming together, and we swing over top down on this beautiful dining room table, and she drops the fish off, and then she starts to walk towards the swimming pool, and we boom down and move with her into a 50-50 into the pool. Well, when you see this backyard, you're like, what? How can I do that? So the first thing I do is I go, okay, let's go to the roof. So I go to the roof, and I have the engineer who owns the house is there, who built it. And I go, can I put a, 2.5, 3 ton crane on top of here and be able to dolly it along the roof and everything? And he's like, yeah, that should hold. So then we, literally put this, 35-foot stick of track and this 2.5 ton crane, and we're, doing this shot, and it all comes alive, based on him describing the vision, and then it's my job to block it in a way that I can then use the limited budget to be able to pull it off.
Wow. That's incredible. When does that film come out?
It came out in Italy. It's coming to the States in I think June or July, but you can it's called A Casa Tutte Bene in Italy, and it did very well. It was released around Valentine's Day.
Wow. And so 9 pages of that every day, though. That's,
yeah.
I mean, it really does. It does sound a lot like it does sound like Children of Men or Touch of Evil. But also, so when you're talking about how you've kind of developed an ability to light for 3 cameras at the same time. If someone was listening to this and was like, how can I do it? I have a similar issue. What are the things that I don't know. I know you can't explain to someone how to be able to light in every situation for 3 cameras, but what are the things that you're thinking about? How do you come up with a workable scheme to do that so that every camera looks good? That's always a problem. And you always hear Quentin Tarantino will only shoot with 1 camera. Well, obviously you'll be able to control everything with 1 camera. How do you get 1 camera's worth of control out of 3 at the same time?
Exactly. And Gabriele's whole reason for doing this is it's all driven on emotion. So he's trying to get the best performance out of the actors all at one time. I'll never forget on Fathers and Daughters with Octavia Spencer and Amanda Seyfried. And we did the scene where she came in and Octavia Spencer was like this head of a social service and Amanda Seyfried was a therapist. And we do this oneer where we take them down a hallway, we hinge into this doorway, we walk in with them, I hand the Movie off to a grip who sits on an apple box. As he's sitting on an apple box, another Movie comes out from a closet and positions over the shoulder of Amanda to Octavia Spencer, and then a dolly pops out of a broom closet with another Movie mounted on it, all set up, dollies across the hardwood floors, and does this beautiful push-in on Amanda Seyfried as she realizes that she only has 1 week left to get this child to speak, or Octavia's going to rip her. From this kid, and she's really felt like she's gonna be able to get to her and unlock her. And this Octavia, we did 3 takes, and Gabriele comes in and he goes, "Okay, we got that," and she's like, "Okay, what is that device?" That's the first thing she said to me.
About the movie?
Yeah. And I said, well, it's this movie. It's gyro stabilizing. She goes, why is every film not using this? I feel so alive. I feel like I can be with the performance. I'm not, we just move with it and everything. And then we did the next scene very much the same way. And then we wrapped them at noon. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I can't wait to come back tomorrow. It was just that kind of atmosphere, and I had the same thing on Into the Badlands. When I was working with Martin Kozaks, he came up to me and he goes, Shane, I've never felt so alive as a performer. This movie, the way you're moving it, and we just feel like this is all just happening. I never felt this before. And this is where it really started to, I'm on to something here. Not only did the Act of Valor thing where I was doing this very raw and handheld and intimate with the Navy SEALs, now I'm taking another device that's much more on a drama-based center. So it's not all handheld and rickety and all that kind of stuff. It's like moving the camera in a very elegant way, but it's building the drama, and the characters feel like they can be, very open and feel like they're on stage. And that's what really started to generate great performances. What I try to do is this. Filmmaking is art and science. You have to demystify the science for the director so he just feels like he's creating art. Mm-hmm. And my job is to take that science, bottle it all up, control it, understand the pros and cons of it, the quirkiness, what's going to fail, and try to have a backup plan. What if it does all fail? What's your plan B, C, and D? And really kind of let him or her just breathe and just really, go in there with just not worrying about anything. And then I take, by demystifying and going inside the science and the tech, I try to see how that tech can take the story higher. And then I deliver that to him or her, whoever the director is, and say, okay, if we're able to use this device, this is going to create, like I told him with Amanda Seyfried, I said, think about this character. This character has no foundation. Her dad died at 8 years old. She was put into a foster home. She was raised by her evil aunt in a very dysfunctional house. She came out not knowing love. I said, that camera should not be locked off. It should not be, it's got to be unsettled. Her base is sand. Mm-hmm. Right? And when I started to see how the movie looked, it wasn't floaty. Like a Steadicam looks awesome, but I'm just saying that it can be floaty if you want it to be. Yeah. But the movie had kind of this, because this was before Clausen rigs, this was before Ready rigs, this was before anti-gravity. This was literally us holding the movie for 4.5 minutes while they delivered their performance, and my hands would start to shake.
I know that was my biggest problem when I first saw a movie. I'm like, who's going to hold this thing in front of them all day long?
Exactly. So we got this thing called the ab blaster, which was this thing for being able to pump your abs up, and the thing was bent like a kind of a wave, and you'd lock your arms in this thing so you could just put it right there and just lock. And I'd sit there, and for a while I'd sit there and I'm like, you'd start shaking, and you'd see that little gyro just starting to move just a little bit, and I'm like, holy shit, this is sand. She has no foundation. And then I showed, the tests to Gabriele, and he goes, what is that? That looks so cool. And he goes, it's not handheld. What is that? So it's this crazy gyro-stabilized device called the Movi. And it was, kind of made out of carbon fibers, and there was really it was revolutionary, but at the same time, it was so unfilmmaking friendly. It's like, when you think about a remote head, you think about, okay, if you set it there, it's going to stay there. Well, no, this thing drifts, and because it's a gyro, it's constantly moving. That's what makes the thing cool. Well, then I just took that and said, that's going to be our capture. That's what's going to deliver her emotion. Because you'd sit there in a shot and you're majestic mode, and then all of a sudden this thing would start panning like this, and you're, oh shit, I got to correct it. Oh, it's tilting up a little bit. No, it's tilting down a little bit. So you never could be happy with your frame. And when I showed Gabriele that, he's like, that's it. That's Amanda. And it was kind of like, okay, see, it's like you got to understand the tech to present it to the director, and then they look at it and say, oh my God, this is going to be the camera emotion of our character. And that's where, when Act of Valor came in, and we started to share knowledge when we created the Hurl blog, and we got so much knowledge back, I realized that, a really nice group of us started this DSLR Revolution. And we, all of a sudden, people that never had a voice now had a voice. But a lot of people moved on. Lydia and I circled back and said, okay, these people that now have a voice, now let me tell you how to take that beautiful tech and really rock it out.
Well, that's been a big part of what you've done in addition to all that stuff. Yeah, it's kind of like a service back to the community, is to help people learn how to do, not necessarily exactly what you're doing, but how to figure out how to tell their own stories cinematically in doing lighting seminars and all that stuff. So how, you're already talking about how that came about, but talk a little bit about like how that works today.
Well, I mean, what Lydia and I wanted to do is, it's, as an ASC member, as an Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Science member, our job is to educate future filmmakers. I mean, I think it's my responsibility. And at the same time, as I want to be able to be an artist and create, there's that responsibility that really laid on me after the DSLR Revolution, where I thought, my God, we woke so many spirits up and engaged so many people to tell their stories, but a lot of them didn't know how to really do it well. They, you'd start to see all these Vimeo feeds of just out of focus and wrong shutter speeds and all this stuff that they were trying their best, and they were fumbling through the process. And I'm like, well, how can we create kind of an educational resource to educate them on what I do as a cinematographer and share my 30 years of experience with everyone. And this is where Lydia and I created the blog in 2009. And then at 2014, everyone said, we want more. And then at that point, we created Shane's Inner Circle. And this is a membership site where you learn every nook and cranny of cinematography, of directing, of whole process of being a filmmaker, from not only from just the lighting and the tech side, but understanding leadership and longevity and resiliency. And, Lydia and I also do a podcast together for all the members, and she really weighs in on the lifestyle and how do you survive in this business, and how you have a very long, successful career, and how you manage your family and balance all that, and health as well, and working out and taking good care of yourself and eating right, and what nutrition and juicing, or, she's always got me on these goddamn cocktails. I'm like the rat in the lab, right? She's like, yeah, I just read about this guy down in San Diego. He's got some brain food. And I'm like, brain food? What the hell is that?
It's brains. Don't eat it. It's made of brains.
So she gives me these things, these freeze-dried capsules and everything. She's like, take 2 of these morning and night, So, of course, I'm like, okay, that sounds great. So I take them, and the next day, my stomach, I'm just like, feeling so bad. And then I got this massive headache, and I'm like, all right, I'll work through this.
It's from your brain expanding with knowledge and brilliance.
I'll work through this. I know I can. After week 1, I was like, get me off of this shit. It's going to kill me. Right? And she's like, all right, yeah, maybe that wasn't so good. And then she's like, hey, Poe, you want to try this brain food? And like Poe takes it, and she's like, I'm having these, psycho dreams at night. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, it's infecting our whole family. Get this shit out of the house.
I can see the music.
So I'm like this.
I taste Band-Aids. What's wrong? I'm tasting Band-Aids.
But it's really fun because we banter back and forth on the podcast about how she tries to kill me each week, and then I can then pass the stuff that doesn't kill me on to my inner circle members.
Oh, so now I need to join so I can find out what didn't kill you.
Exactly.
All right.
So, the one thing that I think, off of Act of Valor, there was a lot of innovation that went into that. And out of that film, it generated a lot of third-party gear. Well, we did the same thing on Fathers and Daughters, because that was the first movie that ever used the Movi.
Yeah.
And we used it 70% throughout the film. So not like, oh, we're going to do this wonder shot where people hand it off here and go through the 2 and, go up the stairs, and then we clip it onto a piece of string and we rip it. It's like, no, this is A, B, C, D, E, F, G camera. This is, I'm using it as just, if I'm doing a dolly move and pushing into Russell Crowe, it's on the Movi. It's a remote head.
Yeah.
So, a remote head. Well, who operates a remote head with a joystick? Nobody in cinema. You use wheels.
Yeah.
Well, none of that was developed. So I went to a very good friend of mine at Hot Gears, and I had him engineer analog to digital, so I could use the Hot Gears with the Movi. And that's what kind of really started to flip that. And then everyone started to say, wow, we got to support this thing. People are like, shaking, and the ab blaster can only hold you for so long, right? So then the Ready rig came out, and the Clausen rig, and the anti-gravity rig.
Yeah.
So all out of this became the innovation. And it's this kind of, process that I love in filmmaking, because I think it's not burying yourself in the tech, but seeing how that tech is then going to take the story even higher.
Well, to me, that's something that's interesting, because I know we've talked so much about Act of Valor, but I remember out of that came all of these rigs that you created, like the Man Cam and like all of these different rigs that you built. Where does that engineering sensibility come from with you?
I think it comes back from my childhood. I mean, my dad was a professor's assistant at Cornell, as well as a farmer. So we had like a 250-acre farm that I grew up in upstate New York, kind of near Ithaca. And it was, me getting up every day. I was on that tractor at 5:30 in the morning, and then I'd get off of it and then hop on the school bus and go to school at 7:30, 8 o'clock. And then I'd play sports till 4:30. I'd get back on the tractor at 5 o'clock. and I would be doing my homework on the tractor while I dragged, plowed, or harvested whatever the hell I was doing till 11 o'clock at night, and then I'd do it all over again. And it was, my dad was the kind of guy who could make something out of nothing.
Like, did you have like a metal shop or a wood shop?
Yeah, we had everything. We had, oxyacetylene. We had arc welders. We had, he would, one day we were out by the barn out back, it was the sap shed because we made maple syrup as well. And we were out there and we were playing with black powder, and we jammed black powder into this big ass pipe. And we blew it up by putting one copper wire across it and then dead circuiting it into an outlet. And it fried the copper wire, blew up the black powder, and basically created this massive bomb that we put inside of an old chimney, and it blew the chimney all to hell. So we were like, wow, this is cool. Now, when we blew the chimney all to hell, it created, we found this old sewer pipe. And we're like, oh my God, if we take this sewer pipe and we put the black powder in the back end, we could create this cannon, right? And
Please, listeners, don't do any of this.
We're sitting in there welding it and all this stuff. And my dad walks by and he goes, what are you doing? And I'm like, Dad, we just blew up that chimney out back. And now we're thinking we can make a cannon. He goes, that thing's going to need legs.
So you were learning from an early age how to take a perfectly awesome idea and improve it always.
Always. So sure enough, he went out there and he got a couple pieces of metal and he welded these legs onto the damn thing. And he goes, you know what? I remember Charlie, his dad. He goes, I remember he had some of those lead weights. And I'm like, where? He goes, over in the barn. So he walks in there and he's going through all the stuff and he finds this pear-shaped lead weight that weighed about 4 pounds, just like a goddamn cannonball. So we put the black powder in there. We stuffed the thing down there. We dropped the thing in there. And that thing, when it went off, that pear-shaped weight was rising at 400 yards heading for the woods. And all we heard was cracks as it goes through the woods. And he goes, now that's a cannon. Because my dad was a huge Civil War buff. We went to every damn Civil War battlefield in America. Like, I went to Gettysburg 8 times. I did Pickett's Charge. We went to Vicksburg and saw the siege. We went to Antietam, wherever it was, we went there. And it was the kind of thing where when we made that cannon then went everywhere with us. So it's like every soccer game, we would blast that cannon off before the soccer game. We wouldn't have anything in it. It would just be a big explosion, right? Oh, what we got into was pretty insane. We were... So that's where my ingenuity comes from.
The primal need to blow things up.
Exactly.
And honestly, I think I can't think of a better place to end the podcast. Shane, you have not disappointed. This is awesome. Before we go, where can people find your work online?
You can go to shanehurlbut.com. That's where all my reel is and everything. And then the Hurl blog at the Hurl blog, thehurlblog.com. And then if you're looking for cinematography education, like no other, it's really something, a passionate project for me to really educate the future filmmakers of tomorrow. And you get it all at shanesinnercircle.com.
So everybody check out shanesinnercircle.com. I hope we get you a little bump here. And thank you so much for coming on here. I can't thank
you're
you
so welcome. Thank you all.
So that was Shane Hurlbut, and holy crap, lives up to the hype every time. I could listen to that guy talk all day long.
Good, because we cut 3 hours out of that interview. So, no, I'm kidding, but we are very much looking forward to having Shane back on the show.
Yeah, Shane's a legend, and he's amazing, and he changed my life, and he's one of my heroes, and I'm so excited we got him on here.
All right, so Ben, we got a pretty... Well, it's really hard to follow Shane, so we didn't want to have another cinematographer follow Shane.
Yeah.
Instead, we have another legend in his own right. He knows everything about cinematography, and he's not a cinematographer. He's a film critic.
But he's a legendary film critic.
He is a legendary film critic. Literally wrote the book on cinematography.
And many other books. Many thousands of other books.
And has an awesome podcast that you can also listen to, and I will put all of that in the show notes.
So without further ado, here is The War Story by Leonard Maltin. Boom.
And now, war stories.
It must have been 5 or 6 years ago. I went to a press screening on the Warner Brothers lot, one of their screening rooms. And the film was about to start. The house lights went out. When the movie began, it was in the middle of the film. And everybody realized it right away, including the projectionist. They put up the house lights. The publicist said, "We're so very sorry, we'll fix this in just a moment. Be patient." Didn't take long. The lights went out. And I turned to the guy next to me, a total stranger, and I said, "Hey, we're watching 35 millimeter." I don't think he understood what I meant. But what I meant was, you can't show a DCP out of order. That had to be a print we were watching. And I became sort of nostalgic for the idea of watching a print, even though it had been shown mistakenly. I stayed to the very end because I always read the credits. And I saw the projectionist, who I'd known casually. He was mortified. He said, "I've never had that happen in 25 years. I said, don't worry about it. It was fun. I knew I was watching a print."
And now, short ends.
So that was Leonard Maltin's War Story.
Look forward to Leonard Maltin in our next episode for his full interview.
Fascinating guy. So, Illya, it's time to pay the bills.
That's right. Bill paying time. So, hey, Arri introduced something really cool at IBC this year called the OCU1. Arri, of course, wonderful sponsor of the program, has come up with a teeny tiny FIZ, and FIZ is actually a acronym, FIZ, which stands for Focus Iris Zoom. It's a little controller that allows someone to adjust a lens remotely without having to touch the lens, which you wouldn't know this from, it's not necessarily intuitive, but sometimes really important to not touch the lens or to have someone else have remote control of a lens during making a movie. It is a interesting little knob, and it's got a cool LCD display on it. And basically this little device called an OCU1 will control 3 motors at your fingertips, and there hasn't really been anything like this out there made for professionals.
So Arri, again, just blazing a trail in lens control in a way that, nobody else would even think to make this product. And
but I guarantee you, now that they've made it, there's a bunch of people who will be going, that's pretty interesting.
That's a cool idea. And now I've learned a new term, and that's fizz.
Fizz, yeah, no, it's not the bubbles in your drink. It is Focus Iris Zoom.
So thank you, Arri, for making a fizz controller.
All right, Ben, it's time for short ends.
All right. You want to go first? You want me to go first?
You go first.
All right. My short end this week is the completion of the Orson Welles Orson Welles' final masterpiece, The Other Side of the Wind.
Oh.
Which I think I first heard about around 1997 when I started becoming very interested in Orson Welles. That was when I tracked down F for Fake on VHS. And maybe it was around then that I heard that he'd made a movie in the 70s. So as it turns out, it was between like 1971 and 1974. It stars John Huston and Peter Bogdanovich.
Whoa.
And it was unfinished from 1974 till like a few months ago. So here's the short version of what happened. Some of their money came from the brother-in-law of the Shah of Iran. When Iran fell in the late 70s, all of the assets of this movie were seized by the Iranian government, and they were kept in a vault in France. Now, Orson Welles had cut some work print, and there were like some work print scenes that had circulated about the movie, but there was no completed version of the movie. And for years, firstly, Orson Welles, when he was still alive, tried to get the film finished, Iran wasn't holding it for a political reason. They just wanted the goddamn money. So he kept trying to get people who would buy it out, just get it out of hock. And it never happened during Orson Welles' life. Of course, he died in, 1985, 1986, right? And so Peter Bogdanovich tried to finish it. And apparently he had made Peter Bogdanovich promise that he would finish the film if he couldn't himself finish it. So years and years have gone by, and there were also lawsuits, I believe, between Illya Kodor, who was Orson Welles' basically partner, girlfriend for the last 30 years of his life, and Orson Welles' wife, I think his wife was no longer with us, but his daughter. So there were all these different legal entanglements, and it took forever to get all of these elements, and the only place that could do it really was Netflix. So Netflix got all of this out of hock and paid to finish Orson Welles' classic. To me, the weird side of this is that Netflix, being Netflix about it, just one day there's The Other Side of the Wind. I mean, they got some press, you could read about it in the New York Times or whatever, but it was no fanfare. The final movie of Orson Welles completed. And it is banana pants. It's definitely worth seeing for people who love Orson Welles, but it's sort of like it's like him taking apart what a filmmaker is, and the name of the movie refers to a film within a film. So John Huston plays an old film director who's making his final film, and the movie he's making is called The Other Side of the Wind, and it is almost a humorless parody of an Antonioni film.
Wow.
And it's gorgeous. You watch it, you're like, Orson Welles could just do anything. He was brilliant. And the frame outside the movie that John Huston and Peter Bogdanovich are in, I look at it and I'm like, when you first saw JFK, the Oliver Stone movie, and you're like, look at the crazy editing and the way he's using different formats. Orson Welles did that in 1971. The film just never got finished, but it has a very similar feel to sort of what Oliver Stone did in movies like Natural Born Killers. And it was shot by a guy named Gary Graver, who was Orson Welles' kind of dedicated cinematographer for the last many projects of his life. And Gary Graver apparently tried to finish the movie. So in addition to The Other Side of the Wind being on Netflix, they made 2 documentaries. One's called They'll Miss Me When I'm Dead, and the other one, you kind of have to, if you go to the Other Side of the Wind page on Netflix, it's under trailers and more. It's just a documentary about how they restored all this footage, which included John Huston's audio tracks. A lot of them were lost. So they brought in his son, Danny Huston, who does a perfect impersonation of him.
Whoa.
to ADR John Huston's voice.
That's incredible.
It's just a fascinating movie, and I'm excited that I got to live to see it. It was something that I've been wanting to see for a long time. I don't know that it will appeal to people who aren't already fans of Welles, because it's so eccentric.
So aren't fans of Wells's Touch of Evil and Citizen Kane, or aren't fans of Wells's Transformers the movie? Which part are you talking about?
I'm talking about Welles as director. So I would say, Citizen Kane, Magnificent Ambersons, Touch of Evil.
That's a lot of people. A lot of people really do.
Chimes at Midnight. Yeah. And actually the documentary about Orson Welles is, there's several documentaries out there about Orson Welles. But the documentary about him is pretty interesting because it deals with the struggle to try and get this film made, but it also just kind of deals with the struggle that Orson Welles himself had, and talks about kind of how ingenious he was as a filmmaker. I feel like he's one of those people who got run over by the Hollywood system because he was proclaimed a genius at 23 and washed up by 27, and still had his best work ahead of him. There's a quote in there in the documentary that says that everyone says Citizen Kane is the best movie ever made, but it's not even the best movie Orson Welles ever made.
Agreed. Yeah. For my money, I love Touch of Evil. That's the one.
I love Touch of Evil, and actually after watching this, I haven't seen Chimes at Midnight, and I want to see it. I have a lot of his movies on some format or another. I'm a big fan of F for Fake, which is it's the last finished movie that he released in 1972, also shot by Gary Graver. I'm a big fan of that, but Touch of Evil is great. The Trial, the adaptation of Kafka's The Trial is really good.
I don't think I ever saw that.
Mr. Arkadin is kind of a rehash of Citizen Kane, but it has some really interesting things. But the thing is that nobody, for my money, ever beat Orson Welles at being an innovator visually. And when you watch The Other Side of the Wind, you're looking at a guy who was, he's probably in his 60s when he made it. You watch the documentary about the making of it. It's like he made that movie with like half a dozen people. And I mean, like, really, there was almost no crew, and they were all like in their 20s, and it was a very indie film kind of a vibe. And he really was trying to take the piss out of Antonioni, right down to they shot most of it at the house that was like adjacent to the house that Antonioni blows up at the end of Zabriskie Point. So anyway, so that is my very long short end, and I hope a lot of people will, who are listening to this will check out The Other Side of the Wind. It's a weird time capsule because it's like very much a product of its time, and so a lot of it feels weird and dated in its own way, but it also feels like miles ahead of its time when you think of it as a movie that was made in the early 70s, and there's just something so brilliant about it, and it's fun watching, John Huston and Peter Bogdanovich, who are both like master directors themselves.
That's right.
Playing movie directors.
I just think it's amazing that there's a Orson Welles film to be seen in 2018 that the world has not really seen before, and it's on Netflix. You literally can just go like, oh, no fanfare, but there it is in the list. Yeah. The Other Side of the Wind.
I know, like, we're so used to like movies having like a big build up and I feel
no bus stop campaign.
Nothing. I feel like they were really pushing The Haunting of Hill House, a perfectly fine series. Like right when that came out, but to me, like it was one of the big cinema moments of 2018.
But they spent a lot more time promoting Fuller House, or oh god, what was the Hemlock Grove?
Hey, don't be down on Hemlock Grove.
Hemlock Grove just had. Let me tell you, I couldn't turn on Netflix for a while without a giant like dire wolf with an arm coming out of its gullet or something like that. That was
fun.
That was the thank you Netflix for giving me that image burned into my memory.
The one, I forget the stand-up comic, but I would turn on Netflix, and for like a month there was some fat middle-aged guy who did a stand-up special with no shirt on, and that was like a bearded guy, and it's like, I'm not finding this funny.
Larry the Cable Guy kind of.
Well, I mean, maybe he would flatter himself to say he had the physique of a younger Larry the Cable Guy.
Okay. Gotcha.
Larry the high-speed internet guy, we'll call him. But every time I turn on Netflix, there it was, and I was like, come on, Netflix, like who the hell wants to look at this? If I wanted to see an overweight guy with his shirt off, I'd like stare in a mirror. Anyway.
All right, Ben, so my short end this week is a little bit geeky, but what else is new? So, DJI, the company most known for drones, has built a teeny tiny little camera and gimbal all in one, and it's about half the size of a cell phone. It's really, really small.
Really?
And you can shake it all around, and it doesn't make the image shaky. It's got one of their very professional gimbals, and the camera that's on it comes off of their very professional drones.
What size sensor?
Small. I don't remember. It's not supposed to take the place of a DSLR or something else. What it is, though, supposed to be is the ultimate vlogger sort of runaround camera. And the way it works is it's got a little USB connector or Apple Lightning connector that you plug into the base of your phone. Your phone becomes a screen. There's not a delay the way there used to be with other systems, and you can actually send all of your images as you're capturing them to your phone for live streaming or for podcasting or for any sort of scenario in which you might need to be immediately putting out to a cellular network to get your, live Instagram type of thing out into the world. You, of course, don't have to send it out live. You can record it. You can record it to your phone or the memory card built into it, but really stable, and $350. I mean,
not bad.
My company's going to be selling it, but of course I know that a lot more people are going to go buy it from Best Buy or something like that. It's going to be
Amazon
everywhere in a couple of weeks. By the time you guys are hearing this, the DJI Osmo Pocket, as they're calling it, and it is truly tiny. This tiny little thing, and it makes a really great looking image. There'll be all kinds of.
What's the resolution? Do you know? Is it 4K?
Oh yeah, it's 4K or beyond. And
oh really?
It's I think it's at least 4K.
Does it to some degree take the place of like a GoPro in somebody's life? Not to be down on GoPro, they're still out there.
Yeah, it absolutely does. It is definitely something that would take the place of a GoPro, or take the place of someone's phone, or potentially take the place of almost any sort of non-professional sort of camera situation, which I think is mostly inhabited by people who are kind of doing stuff for YouTube or Instagram or that sort of thing. It is going to be the thing that you throw in your pocket. It's got a rechargeable battery, and I think also it can be a rechargeable battery for your phone too. I think it's got a couple of extra
Sounds
features,
like a good thing that somebody with a new baby might go film their baby, goofing off in the park with.
Totally, and it also has a little screen built into it, which other little cameras don't. So GoPros do have screens. There's some things, but this is you can shake it all around, and you can switch with the touch of a button to selfie mode or portrait mode, the 9:16 mode that some people like, the Instagram sort of mode, or if you want the traditional widescreen. It does all that, and for $350, let me tell you, the people out there who thought, I couldn't get a decent, easy-to-use 4K camera that's stabilized and great for tourism and kind of anything else that you might need a little video for, yeah, those days are over. $350, it's an impressive little thing.
That's fun. Cool.
Yeah. I got a little sneak preview about a week ago and then got in trouble for saying something online, so I'll never do that again. So.
They send the leg breakers over to you.
They didn't send the leg breakers, but I got this text message that said, "Stop posting on the internet." And then I was like, I thought the cat was out of the bag. Someone else had posted about it, and they're like, "Yes, the cat is out of the bag, but stop posting." So I won't do that again. I thought that it was much more casual with DJI, not like some of the other companies, but no, turns out it wasn't so bad for me. Someone at Best Buy, I guess, leaked it, and it went really wide. So, but now it's out, and we can talk about it. So
sweet. Well, that sounds cool. Put that in your Christmas wish list.
You could probably fit a dozen in your stocking. They're tiny. All right, Ben. Hey, that does it for episode 27. Wow. I got. Wait. I totally. I
where can people find you online, Illya?
They can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras at hotrodcameras.com.
You can find me, as always, at benrockonline.com or anywhere that you do social media except Snapchat, because I'm apparently over the age limit. You must be younger than this to understand Snapchat.
Yeah, I think it's 14.
Yeah. So, but you can find me. I'm at Neptune Salad on the Twitter, and I'm on Facebook. I'm everywhere. I'm everywhere you want to be. Also, before we go, we want to again thank our awesome producer, Alana Cody.
That's right. Alana, thank you very much. And we got to thank our editor, Ben Katz, who put together the interview for Shane Hurlbut. I know that was
and also
work.
The epic war story, because that was quite a Herculean effort, and I was very impressed when I heard his work on that.
Kay Zalatrachi, who I'm convinced doesn't listen to this show at all.
Yeah, if everybody would go to his website, which is musicbykays.com, and just go to the contact or whatever, and besiege him with inquiries about projects that you're working on.
Your music's awesome.
Yeah,
I heard it on the Cinematography podcast.
100% of the music that you heard on this was by Kay Zalatrachi. He's an amazing composer, and if I haven't said it before, I'll say it now. He's also an awesome VFX artist and color grader. That guy can do everything.
If you needed any of those skills, that's your guy.
Kays is quickly making us all obsolete. Anyway, so that was episode 27, and thank you very much. We will see you soon for episode 28.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.